A warm welcome to A Nurse's Lift to Work with Tina and Kate, coaching podcast by two healthcare professionals. We are friends, we are nurses, master NLP coaches, hypnotherapists, parents and business owners. We are busy people juggling many things just like you.
You are in for a treat. We will chat about informal coaching tips, coping strategies, and how to effectively change your mindset and have some fun along the way. So, hop on board with us for A Nurse's Lift to Work.
Welcome to A Lift to Work with Tina.
And I'm Kate.
And today we have a guest with us, Sarah James, and we are absolutely delighted that you're here, Sarah, talking to us about nursing in many guises. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Kate. So my name's Sarah. I am a registered nurse, adult registered nurse, and I have nursed now. I qualified 30 years ago, almost to the day, a little bit more than 30 years. So I've been in the NHS in total for 33 years now, and boy, do I feel it.
She doesn't look it, listeners. You can't see her, but she looks utterly gorgeous. So she's not in black and white or sepia or anything. She's actually,
thank you, Tina.
Yes, she's all right. Yeah. So that's a while, isn't it? Lots of experience, Sarah. So what are you doing now?
So currently, my current post, I've been with the Cornwall Partnership Trust, which is a mental health and community trust. And I've been with the organisation for just over 2.5 years now. This is my first executive role, so I'm an executive director. And my portfolio covers governance and quality improvement. It's quite an unusual trust in that we have some joint executive roles. So we've got a joint chief nurse, our lovely chief nurse Kim, who is our chief nurse, but she's also the chief nurse for the local acute trust as well. So a lot of my portfolio contains some of the services that traditionally would sit with the chief nurse. So I look after all of the patient safety function. I look after all of the clinical audit and clinical effectiveness. I've got the legal team, complaints. There's loads that I will have missed, and people will be sitting there listening to this saying, "Oh, remember me." Information governance. So there's a whole range of different services that I head up as an executive director. But I have got the most amazing team doing amazing things that keep us on the road. Yeah.
Mm. And in a moment, it'd be great to. Yeah, I know it's a wow moment, isn't it? It's such a big portfolio. And,
it is a big portfolio.
And I think it'd be great in a moment to talk about how you arrived at this place, Sarah. But, I always think it reminds me a bit about going to see a play. So you see the actors on the stage and they create this kind of amazing play and you enjoy it. And it's and that's what like nurses are doing every day. But in the background, someone has painted the scenery, somebody's wheeling on and wheeling off the props. Somebody's making sure that, there's been a program, the whole show's been advertised, the health and safety, nobody's has a sandbag bosh on their head. And it's kind of like governance and that whole backdrop to healthcare just feels a bit like that to me. So if you were a nurse thinking, "Oh, this is fascinating, I didn't even realize nurses got involved in this kind of stuff," what would you say to them? What's kind of interesting about it?
Yeah, so it's as I said, it's quite a broad portfolio, and I think that if you were to Google what is governance in the NHS, you'd get probably 10 different descriptions about what it is. But for me, governance is quite simple. It's how we do our business in the NHS. So I know you often are particularly as interesting, isn't it? At the moment, we're sitting on the eve of industrial action again with our junior doctors, our resident doctors, and you hear lots of radio debates that we've got too many managers in the NHS, but we are the people. So as a registered nurse, I've got lots of registered healthcare professionals in my team as well. So we are the people who ensure that the wheels of the cog of a trust are keeping going and keeping turning. It's how we do our business. So for me, my job ultimately is how I keep my organisation safe, because I have a lot of statutory and regulatory functions. So there's lots of things that the NHS just have to do. We have no choice. We have to deliver them. We have to make sure that we are keeping our patients safe, that we're getting really good clinical outcomes for them, that if they're complaining about their care, that we're answering that complaint in a particular time frame. So that's all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And we do all of that in collaboration and in partnership with our clinical and operational colleagues. But for me, ultimately, it's keeping my organisation safe and therefore keeping our patients safe. It's keeping our staff safe. So if our staff feel safe and are happy at work, then they're going to deliver better care. And the correlation between the two is very clear. And there's lots of research on that. Ultimately, it's about keeping my chief exec safe as well and making sure I'm keeping her out of prison for anything that goes wrong. So it's all the systems and functions and processes that keep the everyday work of the NHS going, but it's also very much about improvement as well. So I'm a quality improvement practitioner. When I joined the trust, we didn't have any dedicated quality improvement function, and I'm really excited that we've got a head of improvement starting with us in a couple of weeks, and we've built a little bit of a team to do some of that. That's my real passion. It's quality improvement. So my team, we're there when things go wrong. We're there to help people to work out what went wrong, how can we improve this. It's never about people, it's always about systems and processes. So what went wrong and what can we do to improve it, and what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again, so that our patients get the best and the safest care, they get the best experience, and that we can tell the public that this is a safe organisation to come in and have care in, because we do what we do really, really well. And all of that is tough. And the problem is in the NHS is that I'm not sure there's always a really good understanding that things do go wrong, because we're humans delivering healthcare. We're not robots, and humans are fallible and humans make mistakes. But normally it's because the process or the system they're working in doesn't work properly for them to be able to deliver that care well. So it's about making sure that our systems and processes work and our patients are kept safe ultimately. And that's everything from, so I say I've got the legal function in my team. So that might be, so a lot of their work is around inquests. So when a patient dies, it's about making sure that we're giving the right and the best information to the coroner so they can make a judgment on how that patient died, when, what are the circumstances surrounding their death, and how we learn from that if we didn't do things right. Equally, we're sort of making sure that we are reporting all of the patient experience stuff as well. So when we're engaging with the public and our patients, they give us, generally really good feedback about what we do. And it's making sure that we're balancing the two things as well. So we're reporting, this is where it didn't go quite right, but this is what we're doing to make it better. But our patients are also telling us this, that we get really good care and we feel really safe and cared for when we come here. So there's a balance of the two things, really. And I work really closely with all of my exec colleagues, but particularly with the chief medical officer and the chief nursing officer to make sure all of that happens.
This is really, really interesting. And actually, Sarah, I'm so glad you're here, because raising awareness of what happens behind the scenes, from a governance, from that perspective is so important for every nurse to know.
Absolutely.
Often you find that there is a divide between those doing the clinical face-to-face patient work and those working behind the scenes. And this episode is going to do such a good and valuable role in transferring that information, so people can go, so that's what happens. And I didn't know until I got my ward management post. I had no idea about any of the governance side of stuff. None of that, because I'd never had any exposure to it.
You never have to be involved with it, particularly if something has gone wrong, and then you might be asked for a statement or whatever. But I think the most important thing for me is the relationship I've got, particularly with the nursing staff. So I don't know every nurse, I don't know every staff nurse on every ward, but I work really closely with the associate director of mental health, with the associate director of our community nursing services and the heads of nursing. All of those people are really, really key because, and it does help that I'm a nurse. So being a nurse in my role is not essential, but it was in the job description, it's desirable. And I know my chief exec, when she was recruiting to this role, was really keen to have somebody who was a registered nurse who'd sort of come up through the process, through the system, and sort of learnt their craft as they go. So but those relationships, it just wouldn't work. But you're right, I have worked in places, Kate, where the divide between the corporate services and the frontline services is so vast that how can you ever develop a culture where learning is important and people are happy to speak up?
Yeah.
Because unless you have that, unless they feel safe to do that, you'll never know what's going on, because they won't report incidents, you won't use freedom to speak up guardian, they won't talk to the line manager about something that's gone wrong. So all of that is really important. And if they know that even when something goes wrong, we're gonna wrap our arms around you and make you feel safe in this space. And this isn't about you as a practitioner. This is about the system you're working in, and has it worked for you? And if it hasn't, what can we do to make it different?
And I think
you almost want a little video, don't you? Like a little welcome video on induction for all staff, and go, hey, we're your governance team. Yeah, this is what we do. Like, let's work in partnership.
Absolutely.
I don't know. That would be really cool.
Yeah. And as you're both chatting, I'm thinking of a couple of episodes, and I'll stick links in for our listeners that we've done in the past. Sarah, one on psychological safety, which I think is really relevant to all this,
absolutely.
And another one on what to do when you make a mistake. And I think the sadness for me still now, and Sarah and I listeners worked together a while ago, almost 10 years ago. But, you know, in that time, we still haven't progressed enough to the fact that we mainly talk about this stuff when stuff goes wrong. And that to me is always a great sadness. And listeners, if you're out there and you've never been to any form of governance meeting, ask to go to one as part of your CPD, as your development. A previous job I had in a hospice, we used to just invite people to come as part of their induction or as part of their just general development to come and see what we talked about and what happened to their incident forms. So those of you who have to ever fill in an incident form about any form of incident, whether you tripped up yourself with a cup of coffee or something happened to a patient, you might wonder, well, what's the point of doing this and what's happening to it? But for people to sit in a room and see a discussion happening about incident forms, and see actions being taken and see improvements and suggestions being taken on board, that was the most powerful thing I think we ever did for staff. And people came away from that going, oh, so you do stuff with this information. We're like,
absolutely. And I think, and in larger organizations, you might be filling in that incident form on ward A, but actually there might be something similar going on other wards as well. And as a governance team, we can bring all of that learning together and say, hang on, folks, this isn't just happening on that ward. We've got an issue. There's something wrong with our systems, because if it's being reported in multiple places, then we've got work to do in terms of systems and processes. So all of that's really important. And you're right, Tina, psychological safety is we've still got a long way to go. I feel that certainly in the 2.5 years that I've been with the trust that I'm with, I can feel that shift. And it's a lot of it's in the public domain. So it was a really challenged trust before I joined, and they were in what's called NHS undertakings. So NHS England came along and said, you're not doing very well in that, and you're not doing very well in that. Unless you improve, there will be consequences. And this is how the big NHS works, unfortunately. And it does feel quite punitive at times. But I think the criticisms leveled at the trust at the time were probably correct. And lots of the sort of the structures were put in place before I joined. But I think what I've done coming in is try to support with my chief executive and the rest of the execs that cultural change in terms of it's okay to say I did something wrong, or do you know what, I'm really unsure about that person's practice and I need to speak to somebody about it because I don't feel able to challenge them directly. So all of that is really important. And I felt this shift. I think when I joined, I remember, and it was probably in the first couple of months after I joined, we had a very large senior team meeting, and it was all of the sort of probably 8 BAC and above people in a room. And the number of people who said to me, oh, if we do something wrong, we're going to get told off. And I said, so when's the last time that actually happened to you? When you did something wrong, when's the last time you got told off? And nobody could verbalize anything. No one could give me any examples, but it was a cultural thing that they were hanging on to, a bit like a comfort blanket, if I'm honest, because that That was their safe organisation. That's what they knew. But actually, the cultural shift is sort of saying, actually, you must speak up. It's really important to do that. We don't want, patient safety issues hidden or covered up. And, we want you to tell us about them so we can help you. And that shift in the last 2.5 years has been quite tangible for me. I don't take any credit for it whatsoever. but we've got an amazing chief executive officer, Debbie Richards, who's vastly experienced, and a chair, Margaret Schwartz, who both of them together in terms of the leadership in the organisation have really, really brought that to the fore in terms of it's okay, and they're incredibly visible across the whole organisation, and that really does make a difference because people can see and hear we want this to be a really nice organisation for people to work in.
So it feels quite successful now. So I want to take you back in time.
Yeah,
imagine that wiggly line is happening now all around you, and take you back to newly qualified nurse.
Yeah.
What were you thinking at that time, Sarah? Can you remember? Where were you thinking?
Oh, I do.
Go. What were you up to?
Oh my goodness! So I did my training. So my journey into nursing was probably quite untraditional. I'd worked for a bit, and I was nearly 22 when I started my training. So I'd had a bit of a soiree in Spain for a couple of years worked in the hospitality industry, and realized it was really, really hard work with not a lot of reward. So my mum said, you need to start thinking and settling down and getting a job. So I thought I had lots of nurses and doctors in my family. And interestingly, a bit of an aside, and I will come back to the point, but when I was doing a bit of research or genealogy research, I found out that one of my great uncle was a obstetrician to the royal family many years ago. So going back many generations, we've got lots of medics and nurses in the family. And I thought nursing feels like a really nice thing to do. So I trained in Barnet in North London. It was at the time when we were going through that transition nursing of going from schools of nursing to university-based training. So I was the second Project 2000, which, God, there's a blast from the past, Project 2000 cohort to go through. I started at Barnet School of Nursing. I finished my diploma in Middlesex University and then went on to do my degree at Hertfordshire University. So that was my 3.5 years. I remember distinctly because I remember the tutors in the last 6 months, all they talked about was accountability. And I was terrified and thinking, oh my goodness, if something goes wrong, it's all going to be on me. It was
off with her head.
It felt a bit like that. And I remember my very first drug round taking me about 3 hours on the day that you were allowed to sort of be let loose on the ward. And it was really challenging because all of this time, for these 3 years, you'd been under the supervision of really experienced nurses who were there for you. But I was lucky, I think, with the ward that I ended up my training, my last placement before I qualified. I was given quite a lot of license under supervision, of course, but to sort of like to transition into that registered nurse role of being sort of in charge of my own patients. So that was really helpful. So, and I actually ended up working on that ward as my first job. So that transition for me felt quite easy, but I still remember feeling quite, oh, gosh, this is so important now when we're registered and we could get struck off, because people, like they do now, people always talk about being struck off, and it takes a lot to be struck off to register. But there was all of that. So I found the transition not ridiculously hard, but quite scary, I think, in terms of the responsibility that now sat on my shoulders, that it was my decisions to make around the care plan for these patients, about the right thing to do. And, there were lots of support from tissue viability nurses, all the experts in infection control nurses, etc. But I remember it feeling the weight of responsibility was tangible, I think, for me. Yeah.
When you did qualify, those first few months, could you possibly have dreamt that you would be where you are now? Was it something that you thought maybe one day? Or
certainly not. No, not in the initial phase of my career, I don't think. I didn't. I'm not interesting. I didn't spend a huge amount of time being hands-on, if I'm honest with you. So when the hospital I worked in there was Barnet General Hospital, which still exists. It's part of a much larger trust now. But we moved from the place where I started my nursing career. The buildings were sort of prefabricated huts from the Second World War, and they built a new hospital. It was lovely. So this beautiful, shiny new ward, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And I got promoted, so I was obviously so folks who are sort of younger than I. Remember, we didn't have, we weren't 6s and 7s and 8s. We were Ds and E's and Fs as nurses then. So I started as a band D. I got took a while to get a band E job, but then I was promoted into a band F job, which was like a deputy ward manager. And I think I'd been qualified about 2.5 years at that stage. So it felt quite rapid to me. And looking back, I wonder whether it was a bit too rapid, whether I just needed to get a bit more time under my belt on the wards. But I sort of went into lots of, I described my career as, and it's interesting, our medical director does the same for his, I've had a very interesting journey on my career. I haven't taken a straight path. So I've got lots of colleagues who very clear about staff nurse, ward manager, matron, associate director, deputy director of nursing, chief nurse, and they've gone on that pathway, and that's fantastic. Mine was a bit more meandering than that, my career. So I've worked in lots of different places, but I think I'm trying to think when I left the ward, that I was after my second child, and they wouldn't reduce my hours, so I had no choice. I didn't want to work full time; they wouldn't reduce my hours, so I left, and I worked in a nursing home for a couple of years, which was really interesting. And my goodness, you learn an awful lot about hands-on care and how to care, end of life care. That was really interesting. After that, I went to the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital in Stanmore, which is my specialty. I'm an orthopaedic trauma nurse by background, and I went as a nurse practitioner there, which again learned so much about that particular specialty. Then I went to NHS Direct. Then I went into my first real governance role, I think. So when I was with NHS Direct, I got involved with a lot of improvement work nationally about sort of reducing call times, improved outcomes for patients. And the whole premise of NHS is a bit like 111 these days, is to, not refer everything to 999, to have as many people, saying you can look after yourself at home. And when I got involved in that improvement work, I really realised that I really enjoyed the governance of it. So my next role was as a governance manager, with what was a PCT, which again, before CCGs, before ICBs, my goodness, it feels like a lifetime ago, but we're going back round to that type of model now with the changes. And then we relocated. So all of that was in London and Hertfordshire, and we relocated to Devon about 17 years ago. And then I went into sort of a head of patient safety, head of quality improvement role, which is when I started working with Tina. So I sort of it wasn't intentional going in this direction. I just knew I was never going to be a lifer on the ward. I knew that wasn't for me. And I was fascinated by leadership, by the skill and the art of leadership really interested me. And so I sort of, that's the direction of travel I went in. But did I ever think I'd be an executive director? No, I didn't. I really didn't, because I've, like all of us, I've been for several jobs that I wasn't successful at, and that really impacted on me significantly, to the point I needed about a year's worth of coaching to make sure that I was ready to apply for the next job, because I was so demoralized and felt just I wasn't good at anything I did. I was stuck in a job that I didn't really enjoy. But with the help of a really, really good coach, it put me in a position to feel confident enough to apply for a chief nurse role. I didn't get it, but I didn't feel terrible about it afterwards either. And then this job came up. In between that, I spent 5 years with the ambulance service. So you can see my career has been all over the place. And I think I've also worked regionally with NHS England. So I sort of, all of those experiences have enabled me to be the person and the nurse I am today, because I've got lots of different experience from lots of different parts of the NHS, and have, I think, a relatively good understanding of how the NHS functions and works. And that has all led me to this job, I think, today that I'm in. And I have to say, apart from working with Tina, of course, this is the best job I've ever had. I absolutely love it. I am passionate every day I come into work. It never feels like a chore on a Monday morning to get up at 5 o'clock and leave at 6:30 to go to Cornwall to work. You know, it always feels like a real pleasure and, you know, a real privilege. So, but I haven't always had jobs like this. I've had jobs that I've really, really disliked and been very unhappy in. But I think that colourful career that I've had has enabled me to be able to feel confident enough to apply for jobs that you wouldn't traditionally, maybe, as a nurse. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but
no, it was amazing.
It's been I've just all of it brought together. I think has culminated in today, in where I am today.
It's like doing a jigsaw. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, sorry, Tina. I was going to say I love these types of conversations because it almost enables our listeners to think outside the box about what's an option, what's available. Absolutely. And not following the standard traditional path.
Yeah.
And having ownership and being able to turn around and say, actually, this is what I want to do. And it being considered normal to do that. Yes. And not going off on a tangent.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think, think about my 5 years in the ambulance service. I'm my proudest moment in the ambulance service was when we introduced a nursing role as a clinical lead on ambulances. No ambulance service had ever done it before. So these were the equivalent to paramedics on an ambulance. So they were the lead clinician with an emergency care assistant. And it was only a really small cohort of about 7 or 8 people, I think, originally. But I was so proud of that because we were breaking ground as a trust, and and it was hard going. And I think I learned a lot of my resilience there because the number of people said to me, "It's not going to work, Sarah. That you'll get them through this course, this 18-week course you're going to put them through, and it'll fail. They won't be here in 18 months' time." I think some of them still are. And I know that the ambulance service I worked for have just reintroduced the role again, which is really interesting. So it was, and interesting. I remember there were 2 paramedics who were going to be leading the training. And these nurses, they weren't newly qualified, I have to say. They had to have critical care experience, ED experience, at least, I think we said 3 or 4 years post-qualification. So they had to have some time under their belt, in terms of their confidence. So we put them through an 18-week course, which was fascinating. And then everything from, with the fire brigade, extracting patients from cars, in mocked up scenarios, loads and loads of different stuff that we taught them, extended maternity skills, because often paramedics are going to live births. And the 2 trainers who were there at the beginning, I can't remember, one of them was called Mark, can't remember the other one. And he said, "I'll do this, and I'm doing this because this is my job to train these people, but it won't work. And at the end of it, it's not going to work." And at the end of the course, he turned around to me and said, "I am so sorry for what I said." He said, "These people are coming out." He said, "The skill and experience they've got is over and above a lot of paramedics that we're working with at the moment, because they come with all of nurses come with different knowledge, and the emergency sort of frontline stuff you can teach people that, but it's the knowledge about how the community healthcare system works. Well, who can they refer to? The safety of leaving somebody at home rather than taking somebody to hospital. All of that. So. Yeah, so you're right, and I think with the ambulance service, what we did see, because it was ironic that I had so many naysayers in terms of introducing that role, but there were paramedics going off and doing all sorts of things. They were working in emergency departments, they were working in urgent treatment centres, they were going off into endoscopy units to work, they were going into theatres to work. So if it's okay for paramedics, folks, why can't we have nurses in our service? And I think the only bit of advice I would give to anyone newly qualifying is don't limit your choices. Don't limit your choices in any way, shape, or form, because there are 200 different routes and more you could go into as a nurse. And just because you're doing that thing now doesn't mean to say you can't do something different. Even if you're in a specialty and you're highly specialized in that role, you can do something else. You don't have to stick to it. And in my team, I've got registered nurses working in my team. I've got a social worker who's my head of risk and safety, who is amazing. So I think all of these registered professional roles, we can do other jobs. We don't have to stick to the traditional. And I hope that's what I demonstrate, if nothing else. And I really admire and applaud my colleagues who have wanted to go in a straight line up to a chief nurse role, and that's great for them. But it was never right for me. I don't like if I'm honest, I don't like operational stuff. I really don't. It frightens me. It's really complicated. And now, even when I'm on call, I'm sort of so reliant on my brilliant managers on call to guide me through the weekends. But you've got to, I think, to be a chief nurse, you've got to have a really good handle on operations as well, and how that all works. And that's just not for me. It just not something that interests me particularly.
Yeah,
doesn't float my boat, and my passions are elsewhere.
What I loved, Sarah, if I can just take you slightly back to that conversation in which you were describing how you got to where you got, and you shared that, and thank you for sharing this, because I think it will mean a lot to an awful lot of people, that you didn't succeed on one occasion, and it gave you a bit of a knockback, and you took some time to work out mentally, where your strengths lay and where you wanted to go. And I think for a lot of people, it's so good to hear that from a really senior colleague who has gone on to do and find their niche and find their place and find the happiness at work and their joy, really. Because I think what Kate and I see with potentially and particularly nurses who are at the earlier part of their career is those who have a knockback and they are thoroughly knocked back. And it's just that idea of we succeed or we learn, and that is really the only thing we can do.
It is.
Labeling ourselves as having failed.
You're absolutely right.
We're in a bit of a pickle. So how did your coaching help? Do you mind if I ask you what you really
not at
would
all.
Pull out of that for nurses who might find themselves there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't succeed on 2 occasions in chief nurse roles. The first was for a very large acute trust. And again, on reflection, I probably didn't have the right experience. But looking at my colleagues around me, I was probably as experienced as everybody else. And there is an issue with encouraging people to come into executive roles, because they're scary places for people to be. So I think and I've learned so much from the first one, from the acute trust where I didn't get the job. I've learned so much about the whole process, about how I now recruit people, particularly into senior roles. So the recruitment process was brutal, and I don't think a recruitment process should ever feel brutal. It should feel that you are in an environment to show the best of you and the best of yourself and what you can give, because at that level, an interview is a two-way process. It's not just, do you want me? Am I good enough for you? Am I going to do a job for you? It's do I want to work for this organisation? And I came away after the first day thinking, I don't want to work for this organisation, because I don't like the way that they have put people through recruitment. They were saying the worst. I mean, some of it was fun. Some of it was sort of like, it was stakeholder meetings with patient representatives, with staff representatives, which is all great. All of that's really, really helpful, and always feels like a really nice conversation. But they did something called a fishbowl, where they put you in the middle of a very, very large room. It felt like it was a big gymnasium or something. And there were about 8 people around the table, plus me as the interviewee. And they were talking through various questions. And there was some stuff about maternity developments, about national nursing policy, all of which I felt, I answered reasonably. But around the outside of the room and sitting were about 50 or 60 other people observing the whole conversation. And it just felt awful. It didn't. I thought, how is this bringing the best out of me? If you want me to put me through, I don't know, to test me in front of a fake media camera or something like that, do that. But this just didn't. It didn't feel as if it was drawing on any in-depth knowledge from me. It was very superficial. So I did, and I went away after the first day. It was a 2-day process. Went away, drove home, and thought, that felt really uncomfortable. I'm not sure this is where I want to be. But on reflection, again, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I should have said, I'm not coming back for the second day. I withdraw. But I went back, and the second day was the interview. And it was, I on a couple of occasions, I offered an opinion about something. It was about CQC inspections, and I offered an opinion and was shouted down so loudly in the interview by someone who was in a very, very senior role regionally, not within the trust, but was a regional person sitting on that interview. And I just sort of was quite taken aback, and the whole thing just felt awful. And I went to it, and the feedback I got that night from the chief exec was also telling me I hadn't got the job, and I'd figured that out about half an hour into the interview, that this wasn't me. And she said to me, "You didn't prepare very well. Quite clearly, didn't know your remit." And I had been preparing for weeks and weeks for this job. I'd had, mock interviews with people. I've been talking to those people. I'd done visits to the trust. Mm-hmm. And the feedback was so brutal. It knocked me off my perch. And I sort of sat there and thought, well, that's it. I'm never going to apply for a chief nurse. I'm never going to apply for an executive job again. What's the point? Because they're not, what they're looking for is not me. And interesting, I also have sort of had some not direct but indirect feedback from a regional colleague to my boss, who said, "I just don't see Sarah being an executive director." Right. And my boss was great and sort of said, "No, she's fantastic. She really knows her stuff." And all of that combined made me feel, actually, I'm not valued. I'm not valued in where I'm working.
So Sarah, can I just just hop in there for a second? Yeah. So I mean, that is really tricky, isn't it? And I bet your listeners are listening in and thinking, whoa, how is she even still here? So, how did you mentally turn that around? What mindset things did you use or have in coaching that made you turn that around to be where you are now, which is an exec nurse in an incredibly busy organisation?
Yeah. So I don't think I could have done it without the coaching that I had. And it was a really, it's a really experienced coach who really helped me through. And it was helping me to reframe my mind in terms of my value as an individual and what I was able to offer. So I wasn't able to offer anything to that job, or they didn't feel I could offer anything to that job. And that's fine, but that's their problem. That's their problem over there. So the problem is theirs, not yours. Yeah. And it was about removing myself mentally from that situation and saying, actually, I'm really valuable. I'm really good value. I know what I'm doing. I'm good at what I do. If they don't want me, that's their problem and their loss. So it removed me, and it was sort of like it was, this is the issue. There's the problem for you, Sarah, but actually remove yourself from it completely. And through sort of just conversations and actually, what do you think about what you are good at, what you can add. And it just, through coaching conversations, it just really enabled me to give me more confidence to go for another role. And I did. And I didn't get that. But I didn't feel awful about it afterwards. Yeah. It was like, that's fine. It didn't want what I could offer, but they wanted what that person can offer. And that's great. So that put me in a position where when this job came up, I was like, yep, I'm going to go for that. Yeah. And I'm going to go for it. And I, you get a feeling, I think, when you first talk to the chief exec and you talk to other people in the trust, you get a feel for what people are asking for and wanting in particular roles. And I thought, well, if I don't get it, that's fine, but I've given it a really, really good go again. But it is about being able to learn from those experiences and try and take away some positives. And it's not, you're not shortlisted for a role because unless people think you can do the job, because on paper you can demonstrate you can do the job. The interview is another step in the process. So it was bringing me back to that my application was good enough for me to be shortlisted for a chief nurse role. Yeah. If I didn't have what they want on the day, that's absolutely fine. But actually, I've got the attributes to be shortlisted for these types of roles. But it was just bringing me out of that negative mindset and that headspace.
And it sounds like there was some really powerful things, reframing, a bit of absolutely. Really good self-talk and building your self-belief.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic things. And I guess really encouraging to anyone who's listening and there's had a bit of a knockback experience to think, wow,
yeah, absolutely.
Maybe go and find some coaching or at least a really good friend to talk to or colleague.
Absolutely. And most people will offer you things like mock interviews and stuff like that for jobs. Whatever level whatever banding you're going for, people will always be helpful. Use your HR departments. If you've got a good HR team, they'll help you through some of this stuff. But all of that has really made me incredibly mindful about how I recruit now when I'm recruiting into roles. And obviously, as an exec, I'm generally recruiting into more senior roles, and my amazing team do the rest. But I'm really mindful about the way I set up interviews, about the way I make people feel when they come in, about the feedback. I spend a lot of time giving feedback after interviews, particularly if people aren't successful, and always offer them the opportunity we can talk about it now, or I can go away and leave you to absorb the news, and I'm happy to schedule another call with you in a week's time if that would be helpful.
There's so much kindness in what you've said, actually.
Well, I just think, when you've been there, when you've been on the other side of it and had sort of like, really, feedback delivered in quite a cruel way, I'm just really mindful. And, I think if you do it like that and explain why and give give really good rationale as to why you've gone with, were they a particular candidate but not them, they can go away and it's things for them to work on if they're keen on applying for a similar role in future, or areas for them to improve. And I always offer a conversation before their next job as well. So if you're going for another job and you want a conversation with me, I'm really happy to talk you through what the sort of things they might ask.
What a great offer. I
it's
think
interesting.
Sorry, I was going to say we're coming towards
I was going to say how we shape our future and potentially the future of others by what's happened to us. Now, Tina and I both know that in the Preceptorship for Nurses Facebook group, there's lots of comments about how to treat other people and what to do, what not to do. And it's all from the way that they've been spoken to, these nurses have been spoken to or treated. And we're very, very much about the whole, you are the future, you get to decide what happens to the next generation down. You are the ones that lead the way. You are the ones that decide how to create a better working environment for everybody else. Because we've all got the power to make change, irrespective of where. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really notice in my trust is there is a lot of checking in with people to make sure they're okay. And I hope that, and I'm making an assumption, but I think it does go on at ward level as well. But I've just come off a week on call last week. So you're on call for a whole week as an exec and then on call all weekends. And that means you're literally at your laptop Saturday and Sunday. And then you're back to work on Monday morning. And I had to go down to Truro on Monday. So I was pretty exhausted. And I got down and I was on a call. I found a quiet space to do a call with my chief exec and our company secretary. And the company secretary, so she messaged me, actually, are you okay? I said, I'm just tired. I'm just exhausted because I've been on call. Now I've had to do a 2-hour drive. So, but we do that a lot. And I think it's about recognizing, it's learning. We do a lot of support like this for people about, particularly with managers, about recognizing when their staff are not okay. And actually, what are the signs? Because people hide it really well, don't they? And they plow on and they just get on with stuff. But I think we're getting better and better in my organisation at recognising when you need to ask those questions and actually say to somebody, look, just go away for an hour, go and have a walk, just do something, get out the house if you're working at home, or get out the office. But I think that's the most important thing in the organisation I work for is the culture we've got of caring about each other. Because if we don't, we are in organisations, we're delivering care to patients. If we don't look after each other, what the hell are we doing? If we can't look after our staff, because, we love our patients, we love the public and we love the feedback they give us, but our biggest asset is our staff and our workforce. And if we don't look after our staff, then what's the point in any of this, really? And you're right. It's sometimes I don't interact as much as I should do, Kate, with the Facebook group. But I do see some of those comments, and I think, oh God, how awful for that newly qualified nurse to sort of be berated by a ward manager. And probably it's because the ward manager's tired. They're probably exhausted. They're tired. They might have their matron on their back about something, and all of that is context. But actually, it's not an excuse to behave like that to people. It's about if we can help each other understand our roles, each other's roles a bit better, and the pressures that we're under. I feel under at work at the moment, enormous pressure at the moment, because we've got massive changes with NHS England, massive changes with the ICB. It's impacting incredibly on our trust now and in the future in terms of how we're going to deliver care. We're talking about neighbourhood care and all of that, and I can feel it. And I said to an executive colleague yesterday, I said, normally we're really good at holding this tension in the organisation. I said, we're not doing that at the moment because my deputy's feeling it. I'm talking to other deputies and they're feeling it as well. So on a Friday, we have a huddle and we'll talk about it tomorrow about actually how can we make sure that we're not displaying behaviours that make other people feel under pressure. Now, all of our deputies will say, but we're here to help and support you. Well, yeah, but we don't want you to shoulder this pressure that we're getting, because it's ours to shoulder, not yours. So I'm really mindful of that all the time about, I think being a deputy director is the hardest job in the world. I really do, because you're buffering from above and below. It's really tricky. But we need to hold that, so we're making the organisations, keep feeling safe to deliver the care they're doing.
And I was only thinking about, we've only got a little bit more time with you, but that is just a wonderful thing to be talking about. And I guess in the spirit of that, Sarah, holding that for everyone else, how does that work for you in your well-being? How do you find it, how do you do that life-work balance and make it okay?
Yeah, I think I'm really fortunate in my role. I think I look at some of my executive colleagues. I look at our chief operating officer, who is incredible, and how she maintains the energy that she does. I have no clue, but she does. But she's really good. So, and I think, and I've learned, you learn over the years. So I'm less sort of like day-to-day pressured in my role as opposed to somebody who works in ops. So I'm able to hybrid work. That really works for me. So I'm in Cornwall half the week, I'm at home half the week, and that works incredibly well for me. I've got caring responsibilities at home for my granddaughter. So my chief exec knows that and is really, flexible, allows me to be flexible in the way that I work as well. But I think the most important things are regular annual leave. So you have, the reason we keep an eye on people's annual leave every quarter is to make sure people are taking it. And it's interesting, I recognise I had a week off in October, and then I didn't have another whole week off until end of June, beginning of July. And I felt it, and what are you doing? You should have. I had days off here and there, and a tiny bit over Christmas, but nothing substantial. And I was really feeling it. So I now have got my next annual leave booked in about 8 weeks' time when I'm going away again. So that's really important. Regular annual leave, and there's no harm. I know it's more difficult if you're on a ward, but if you are an office-based nurse, or the nurse is not frontline and patient facing, making sure that you're taking a regular break during the day, because they make sure that happens on wards. So you get your breaks on wards, and that's really important for people to go away from the ward. But if you're office based like I am, it's so easy just to work through, and then you realise at 5:30 you haven't really had a proper break today. You've managed to snaffle a bit of lunch, so I make sure that I try, and if I ever go and sit out in the garden for half an hour with a cup of tea. So I look after myself more in the last 6 months than I ever have done, because I think the pressure of the executive role I started to feel that a bit more. Somebody said to me, you will one day, you'll feel that pressure. So regular annual leave, having breaks in the day. I sleep really well. I'm normally heading up to bed about 9 o'clock at night. Even if I don't turn my light out till 10, I read at night, every night as well. Although last night I did have the football on my phone on the bedside whilst I was reading to listen to see who England were going to be playing on Sunday. So that's really important to me. I look after myself. I eat really well as well. I exercise regularly. Now, all of this is really only in the last 6 months that I've really realised that I need to start looking after myself. Otherwise, this pressure is not sustainable. And I've got probably another 5 or 6 years before I even think about retiring. So I've got to keep going. So I really look after myself physically and mentally as well. That
simple idea of filling your cup, Sarah, it really, it really makes sense, doesn't it? But how many of us actually do it? That
exactly.
Idea that, you can't pour from an empty cup.
No, you can't.
It's being asked of you, so your cup needs to be as full.
I do. You have to maintain that energy every day, and probably the most important thing is meeting up with friends. So I have a small but very exclusive group of friends who I make sure I meet up with on a regular basis. So Tina and I, we've got a very, very good, strong friendship, and Tina and I are meeting up in a week Saturday. In fact, we need to decide where we're going to
have a lovely time. I know, talking about nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. So it is about having that. So I'm going out to dinner with my husband and my best friend on Saturday night. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's things like that. Spending time with my granddaughter is always a joy, if not exhausting, because she's only 5. I've got 3 great boys who are all still quite hard work at times, but just spending time with that family and really appreciating the time off, and particularly after an on-call weekend. This weekend I'm going to appreciate so much because I'm not stuck at my laptop. But it's just appreciating the time you do have away from work, looking after yourself, eat well, sleep well, exercise, have regular breaks, try and get away and do different things, and make use of your brilliant friendship group that you have, to make sure and use those times as well, because we have a bit of supervision, don't we, Tina. It's not just coffee and cake. We have a little bit of supervision as well sometimes. And if you are lucky enough to be able to have a mentor or a coach, to use those people as well to really, think about some of the knottier issues you're dealing with. And as a practicing nurse, your supervision is really, really important as well. So make sure you get your supervision in. That's as important. And if you're not getting it, make sure you're escalating that as well, because that's so important.
Fabulous.
I think that's an excellent place to finish on.
I've really enjoyed this. It's been great. I love talking. Tina will know. I love talking.
Well, it's good to talk to each other, isn't it? And I think nurses don't often find themselves in spaces where they can just talk nursing and nursing stuff. So it's really good. So thank you, Sarah, so much.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Really good. And lovely to meet you properly, Kate, rather than just...
Oh, you too. Thank you. I have taken so much from this, and I know that our listeners will as well. It's all about that understanding, isn't it, from different perspectives. Hopefully that's what in the podcasts we do is open people's eyes and people's worlds to different things.
Yeah, fabulous. Lovely.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
So but at the beginning when we said we nearly always make a cock up somewhere.
This is the moment. Don't worry about making mistakes, listeners, because you only have to listen to the last bit of the podcast and you usually mess up like the sign off.
I'll start it. You ready? Yeah. You've been listening to A Nurse's Lift to Work. I'm Kate.
I'm Tina.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Sarah. Nice to meet everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to A Nurse's Lift to Work with Kate and Tina. Please remember, this is not a replacement for medical treatment or help, so do seek assistance if you need to.
Thank you for joining us. Please do like, subscribe, give us stars, like and share with your friends and colleagues. All the good things.